welcome you all to the third Leonard Transportation Regional Dialogue. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm the director of the Leonard Transportation Center, and I'm very happy to have you here today. I'd first like to thank our sponsors, HNTB and San Bernardino Valley College, the San Bernardino International Airport, GLA, Foothill Transit, EXP, HDR, the PPM Group, Lane, for providing the financial resources to keep this dialogue going. Though we're in a virtual format now, it's important to continue to have support, and I, open up the offer if you're interested in ever sponsoring these dialogues. We will be holding them next year, and it's a great opportunity to come, provide your voice, and think about the future of transportation within this region and be part of the conversation. Now I'd like to invite a good friend and colleague, Greg Holsizer, to give a few words.
Thank you, Kimberly. I really liked how you talked about we're going to have this next year. I love that optimism. I remember when we started thinking about this 3 years ago, we thought, would anybody come and participate? And it's turned out to be fantastic. So congratulations to you, and thank you for your team for all you do to pull these regional dialogues together. On behalf of the almost 5,000 of my colleagues at HNTB, I want to welcome everyone this morning. I'm excited about today's topics. Thank you for to our speakers, who I'm sure we're going to learn so much from today. We're all in a different environment, but doing these virtually has worked out just fine. So I'm not going to take too much time, but I thought I would share with you my Father's Day present that I got on Sunday, which some of you maybe either have or can use. And it's this new sign that I have to keep on my computer. And my wife gave it to me after a particularly interesting incident. So I now have this to wave around whenever anyone walks in the room. So perhaps you might want to get one for yourself. Anyway, on behalf of HNTB, thank you for the opportunity to sponsor, and welcome to today's program. Thanks, Kimberly.
The point of the dialogue is to really have a dialogue. So what we'll be doing is hearing from our speakers. Today we're going to have a round table, sort of panel of speakers, and then we will go into breakout rooms, and we'll put you in rooms. We'll have a moderator, and we'd like to have a discussion on what you heard, what you didn't hear, and how can we move this conversation forward? Because the most important part of having this dialogue is not just hearing all of the great ideas and all the new technologies and the excitement behind the transportation sector, but for also to think about how we can move these topics forward and really get them implemented within our communities so that we have the best results. I'd like to ask Kenny Melicon from the San Bernardino Valley College to say a few words and begin to get us started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenny Melassa. I am the assistant professor of the heavy duty truck department at San Bernardino Valley College. Our department enables students to earn several certificates or an associate's degree in heavy medium duty truck technology. San Bernardino Valley College is part of Volvo Lights project, and our role at the college was to design a certificate and or associate's degree in zero emissions clean vehicle technology, specific to battery electric truck maintenance, and to promote the region's workforce development. The Volvo Lights, which means Low Impact Green Heavy Transport Solutions, is dedicated to making electric trucks a reality. It is part of California's climate investment and is a statewide initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, strengthen the economy, and improve public health and the environment. Volvo Lights is a holistic approach to the entire electromobility ecosystem and will deploy a mix of public and private electric vehicle chargers, including one of the nation's first publicly accessible fast charging truck stations. This panel today will do a deep dive into the practicalities and challenges in realizing these charging solutions innovations for Volvo Lights and beyond. Kimberly, would you like to have your dean come on now, or would you like to
Sure,
go
let's
to?
invite Larry just to come up and say a few words, and then we'll.
Although coming up is, I guess you're gonna have to imagine that, me standing up and walking to the front here. But on behalf of Cal State San Bernardino, and certainly the Jack H. Brown College Business and Public Administration, I really want to thank you all for joining us at the webinar here and the 2020 Regional Mobility Dialogue Series. We've had a lot of success with this series, and the success has actually led us to continue the format. And and the live format seems to actually be working. We're actually attracting more and more people, which is really encouraging. So the topic, getting ready for electric commercial fleets, a panel of experts gives us a vision, is really kind of timely. And certainly as everybody's now starting to get back on the highways, as I see the crowds and the commute time increasing, certainly something we need to deal with here. I want to thank our, certainly the panel of experts, you'll hear them introduced, but also our sponsors, our platinum sponsors, San Bernardino International Airport, Mike Burrows, thank you. HNTB Corporation, Greg and Carrie, thanks for staying with us here. It's making a big difference, and we're excited to continue to keep working with you. San Bernardino Valley College, Kenny, obviously thanks a lot for the support that you're giving us. Our silver sponsors, EXP, Foothill Transit, Lane Construction, HDR, GLA, and PMP groups. Welcome aboard. We're thrilled to have you as a partner here. So with that, I'll turn it back over and enjoy the day, and let's make a contribution to the Inland Empire.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Arvind Kailas, the Advanced Technology Policy Director of Volvo Group North America, to moderate today's panel. Arvind?
Thanks, Kenny, and good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kenny, first off, for creating the slot for this panel. I'm so excited to introduce my co-panelists, but before that, again, Leonard Transportation Center and Kimberly and Kathleen and the rest of you, thank you so much for creating a slot for us, and thank you also the sponsors for making this possible. So hopefully the next 45 minutes will be quick and painless and very informative for everybody. With that, let's dive into today's topic. I'm going to share my slide. I'll use a few minutes to just provide the overview of Volvo Lights, where we are today, and then kick it off to my esteemed panel. And then all the panelists will introduce themselves, and then we're just going to have a dialogue in the spirit of the Inland Empire Dialogue Series. It's not going to be PowerPoints. It's going to be Q&A and this interactive session. So hopefully you'll find that very informative. Perfect. So, I'm going to run through a bunch of things, and if you are not able to take notes, I think you're going to have the slide anyway with you, but the most important thing is the website at the top of the bar, lightsproject.com. It is a website dedicated to the project where we continually update everything about the project. We have photos, press releases, everything that is being generated out of this project, things that we want to share in a public domain. It's all available on that site. So please go check it out at your leisure. What you see over here are two things, well, a few things. So to the right, it shows the geographical span of Volvo Lights. So Volvo Lights lives in Southern California, and it sort of exists between the ports and the Inland Empire. So Inland Empire is very, very key. all this innovation is not happening in Silicon Valley. It is happening right here in the Inland Empire in Southern California. So the Volvo lights will result in 5 sites, and those are the green circles that you see over there. So there's going to be 3 sites in the Inland Empire in the cities of Chino, Ontario, and Fontana. There's one in La Mirada, and then there's one in Anaheim or Placentia that keeps changing. And maybe Kimberly can talk a little bit about that. Kim, our panelist, Kim. So none of this would have been possible were it not for generous funding from California Air Resource Board. The total project cost is worth about $90 million. 50% of it comes from Air Resource Board. Air Quality Management District is the lead, and then there's 13 other partners that you can see. So the logo soup to the left of the screen, without a single partner, this project would not be able to stand on its feet. So every partner that you see is extremely vital to the success of Volvo Lights, and my colleagues that you will meet momentarily are very, very critical to what is happening out here. So as a part of Volvo Lights, the Volvo Group is looking to introduce electric trucks into real-world operations. But as you know, it's just not about the trucks. It's about the charging infrastructure. It's about training the workforce. It's about outreach to the first responder and just having the entire ecosystem ready so that the electric trucks can operate and be serviced and be used to the customer's benefit. So you see that we're bringing the trucks, but then there's Greenlots, Trillium, ABB, and then there's the ports, there's the customers, and then there's a dealership. So Tech Equipment, which is very close to where you guys probably all operate, or where we would be meeting, that's in Fontana. It's one of the largest dealerships in the world, and it's the largest Volvo Mack dealership in North America. So if you go to the next slide, please. Very quickly, the progress thus far. So the project kicked off last year, about April. So yeah, April 2019. And then when you have a project with these many partners, as you can imagine, the first step is to really iron out the administrative kinks. So we spend a lot of time going back and forth and getting the contract signed, and basically we had to build the trucks and our partners had to do what they had to do. But the team has gelled so well that in a short amount of time, we've been able to produce some really, really good results. And that's what you're seeing on the screen. So the Volvo Group has actually produced a total of 7 trucks so far. 5 of them are actually in California. And so you see the 2 straight trucks that are actually in California. One is going to be with Tech Equipment. As a matter of fact, June 18th, we had a press release talking about the completion of the first Volvo Light site at Tech Fontana. And so we have this truck being used by Tech Fontana to shuttle between their 2 locations in La Mirada and Fontana and transport their parts. You see the number 5, but that should technically be 3 because there's 3 of those big rigs, Class A tractors in California. Our field test staff is still testing these trucks, so they're not in the hands of the customers yet, and that's because we're getting ready to install the infrastructure at their sites. However, we have 2 50 kilowatt chargers. That's the top, the second column, the first row. That's the photo of the 50 kilowatt or low power DC charger. And then the bottom, you see the high power version of that, which is the 150 kilowatt charger. So just to give you very, very broad strokes updates, we have the first site completed. There's 4 more sites to go. We have 5 trucks in California. There's going to be 3 more trucks coming very soon. Thereafter, there will be 15 more trucks. So Volvo Lights will result in about 23 trucks, a bunch of off-road equipment because we're modernizing the freight facilities, and a number of chargers, truck chargers, and chargers to charge the off-road equipment such as forklifts and yard tractors. Did I hear a question or anything, or no? Okay. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here's where we start introducing our panelists. So the first panelist is Rob Crandall. Rob, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm the senior project manager for Green Lots. We're responsible with the Volvo Lights program for the installation of the EV projects. Green Lots is a new company to the installation world in the last couple, 2 or 3 years. Our big key to starting out in this programs is our Sky communication network, which can basically tie in any type of charger manufacturing company that's in the United States and other countries. So, and then Volvo Lights, what we're doing is the turnkey construction solution. So we take the project from inception, work with the customers on sites, and build out the project to completion and training for the customers. So we're enjoying working with Volvo, very great company to work for.
Thanks, Rob. Maybe you can go to the next slide, and we have our next panelist, and she's Ruth Liddell. Ruth, take it away, please.
Okay, good morning. I think you can hear me now. Okay, so I'm a project manager for ABB, and I'm responsible for implementation of our high-powered charging system in the U.S., as well as some of our aftermarket infrastructure upgrade campaigns for North America. And I'll talk a little bit about why that second piece is important as well. So ABB is a technology leader driving our digital transformation in a lot of spaces in the industry, including electrification, transportation. So we have actually over 14,000 DC fast chargers as of last week in over 80 countries. So it's great. Our footprint's all over the world. And those chargers are ranging from 50 kilowatt all the way up to 350 kilowatt. So what are we doing for Volvo Lights? Well, we're providing the hardware for it, so the high voltage charging technology. And as Arvin showed in the last slide, he has some photos of our 50 kilowatt systems as well as our 150 kilowatt system, which is our charging depot box. So we're supporting Green Lots as well as Volvo Lights in making sure that everything is installed safely, properly, and then supporting the commissioning piece of it to make sure that we've got the hardware technology up and running, and then the technicians who are working on it, or the operators, are actually trained on how to use it, so it's used safely as well to charge those electric trucks from Volvo.
Thanks, Ruth. And then if you could, Kimberly, please move to the next slide, and where we'll introduce our third panelist, Kim Okafor. Take it away, Kim.
Thanks, Arvin. So yeah, my name is Kim Okafor. I am the Zero Emissions Solutions Manager for Trillium, and my responsibilities include everything from hydrogen, solar, and of course including electric vehicle charging. So I manage the business for both Trillium and our parent company, Love's Travel Stop. Trillium is a leading alternative fuels provider. So we have public and private stations across the country, and the different fuels that we support are compressed natural gas, hydrogen, as well as electric vehicle charging. We do have some light duty chargers scattered across the country. This would be our first publicly accessible heavy duty charger. In fact, it will be the first in California. So that's what we're bringing to the Volvo Lights project. And quite honestly, we're extremely excited about it because when we look over the future as it relates to Love's Travel Stops and Trillium and heavy duty trucking in general, we foresee this station being the prototype. So we're planning on learning a lot here. So we're happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Kim. And I'll just say again, every partner is super important, but you've just met three of our rising stars, I would say. And it's been so amazing personally for me to work with each of them because without them, this project would just not exist. So again, once again, thank you all for putting up with me and the Volvo Group working with us. That was a joke. But then, yeah, I think we're looking to make some great strides and move on with this. Maybe, Kimberly, if you could just go to the second slide, we'll just leave that on as the backdrop. So maybe folks can take a look at it. But then, of course, they should be paying attention to the panelists. Yep, perfect. So maybe we can kick off the discussion because this is all the PowerPoint we're going to share today, and this will be made available to you, and lightsproject.com is where you need to go. But Rob, first up, you're such an important partner. The trucks are there, but the trucks need to be charged, and you're providing the turnkey solution. Would you walk us through the steps, like at a high level, the steps that you have to take to get the first site ready, and then also what you're doing for the other sites?
Right. So, like Arvin said, it's been a while in this process to get, these projects started. It is a lengthy process, a lot of thought to put into, where you want to install, what the locations are, what's feasible in your location. So I just kind of go through some steps here of, what a typical construction and timeline is for this. Of course, like I said, the location is the first key. There's a lot of other things to go along with that to decide what a great location is, and that is the fact of dealing with a utility company. So, I think all of us can imagine that, utilities are, they're easy to work with, but there's a lot of time involved and different engineering steps on our part, on their part, that we come together with, sharing designs and ideas to come up with a great plan. So again, that's a little bit of the timely process of dealing with utilities. Because that makes and breaks your location. If something in your mind seems much better feasibly to park the vehicles and the trucks and charge, may not work out so well as as the utilities input comes together. So it's like I said, it's all about planning, location of the trucks, having meetings up front with these utilities, and that will really help the timeline. You're looking at start of construction to take about 2 to 3 months to get designs turned in for permitting. Permitting has been a kind of a major challenge here lately with COVID, so we have dealt with quite a few challenges in delaying the projects just because of all this, like we've all experienced here over the last couple 2 or 3 months. So, but ongoing, I'm hoping to see some of these projects really escalate in timeline because we've had such challenge to get everything moving. So permitting really is the next. More of a waiting period, not so much as a challenge. Once your designs are complete, we work with different engineering firms that put together basically proof sheets that the customers can view. We run those through like an 80% set just to update, different hardware, different communication connections that apply to certain jobs. Every job's a little different. So when we get through that, it takes about a month to get everything ironed out. We turn into permitting to the local authority having jurisdiction, city, state, whatever that case is. So typically those about a 30-day time frame to get a permit through. So in that meantime, we're gathering, contractor negotiations, things like that to just start the project on time once the permit is issued. And then we're looking at also in that meantime, turning in permitting. We're dealing with the utility at this point to get a drawing from them for a final, they call it a final map. So this final map will give everyone the knowledge to know what the utility side of the infrastructure is going to look like. So again, it's kind of a waiting period to get that information, to put it into the contractor to get the correct proposal, because the utility can sometimes be a pretty large expense. So you don't want to wait till the last minute to work with a utility, because you can really be surprised midway of getting the project started. You're realizing that there's so much additional costs and you don't have time to basically work with them to maybe even change this location to lessen the cost. So there's a lot of issues there, and utilities are very good to work with us. So and then installation typically is about 4 to 5 weeks. So that fits into that 3-month timeline here for design, permitting, working with utility, installation, about 3 months. So weather permitting, hopefully we can do it faster than that, but typically that's been our timeline. Then we're talking about setup, communications and commissioning. So with green lots, we are able to tie your chargers into our network, where you can control on and off times. You can control the loads, the outputs of the chargers. Really works well for your utility bill, to keep the on-demand time frames, to keep costs down of your utility bills. So we work with customers to set up their network the way that it works best for them. And then we also, work with customers on training, use of the chargers, and setting up, charging times. A lot of the vehicles, the trucks, the Volvo trucks, they have engineering teams that work with you also to set up your vehicles. So it's been interesting to be involved in all of this Volvo Lights program. We have 3 projects, 1 project completed, 2 under construction right now, should wrap up here in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have a total of 6 ports on 1 project, 4 ports plus yard tractors and forklifts on the projects. So it's kind of an all-around electric vehicle initiative, to include, yard tractors that pull the trailers around the lots, and the trucks and the forklifts. It's very interesting, and we can just offer full turnkey solutions for whatever your plans are in your company. So any questions on that? I think I covered all of that pretty quickly.
I know, but we all know you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, you and your team. So thank you for that. So, I think what I heard was there's many steps. Oh boy. And this is, trucks are not big cars. So obviously when it comes to installing charging a charger for a heavy duty truck, high power chargers, it's going to require a lot of planning, and then engage the authorities and the utilities early on, and they can be your best friend. So that's great advice. Well, moving on to Root, I know you're supplying the hardware, and obviously, this is probably not readily available and sitting on the product shelf. So can you kind of walk us through some of the things that you're looking at, and the challenges that you have faced as a part of this project?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about, timeline for building, delivering a charger, and then kind of echo some of Rob's points, because I think they're important. But first things first is, so these chargers aren't made to order. As we know, like the Volvo Lights project, as we've seen, electric vehicles are new, so the infrastructure is new. And so it's not just going to be sitting in a warehouse, or, your distributor down the street's not going to have it, especially for the high power like this. If we're talking 150 kilowatts, that's advanced technology. So typically it takes us 8 to 10 weeks, unfortunately with coronavirus and things like that, sometimes supply chain even gets affected more. So can't plan for that piece. but you at least can plan for the standard kind of length of time. So as I mentioned, these are made to order. It really matters. There's a lot of different hardware options, what your site looks like, what your use case is. So, it's exciting to have projects like this Volvo Lights project where it allows us to really understand what the driver is doing when they're interacting with our infrastructure or, the charger operator. So we have that, feedback for improved use. And the nice thing is that ABB is continuously improving our charger design. As our user experience is important, it's different. Also, too, to keep in mind, as Arvin said, it's different for a passenger vehicle and what the infrastructure looks like for that versus a truck. And one of the things I mentioned when I discussed what I work on is I mentioned that upgrade campaign piece. So it absolutely matters, getting that feedback from the field to then either change the design of our charger or figure out something that's better. And where that really affects us and this project is the supply chain is new. So if we're changing the design of the charger or improving it, or even, as I said, this is a new industry, the demand isn't there from the supply chain side yet. So it takes time to build that up and for it to be a standard absolutely ready. And so that is a part of why we say, it's a long time. Expect 2 months, if not potentially longer, for your charger, is because we want to make sure we've got everything there squared away on the supply chain side. Because you never know, especially the other thing is, this is a new industry, so there's some new players coming up. And some of those components, they might not be able to supply for the demand that we have, as we start rolling this out and having this infrastructure all over California and then all over the U.S. for these trucks. You're going to need a lot of components in there, and you're going to need them right away because we want to, deploy these fast when we get to that point. So like I said, new technology, we're still building that demand from the supply chain side. One of the other things you definitely want to be thinking about then, if you're purchasing this hardware, to either go along with your truck or you're working with a partner to get the truck and the hardware at the same time, is the charger's operational lifetime. So be thinking about the point after you deploy the charger. So we've got partners like Greenlots that support, as Rob mentioned, the installation, everything. But then, you don't just get to walk away from it. It's something that humans are interacting with every day. And you want to be thinking about, well, how am I going to support this? How do I make sure I don't have downtime? Or how do I fix that if I've got downtime immediately? So one of the other things that I like to always tell people to think about is think about your spare parts, or think about the local technician you've got on site. Because we know we have trained electricians and technicians at all of these sites, but making sure that they're also trained then to potentially fix the equipment if it goes down right away, or, it can happen. Someone can roll over the cord that you use to charge your truck, and then you've got a broken cord and you're kind of stuck. So thinking about those things, and obviously we try to make sure we have our, supply locally, but I always recommend that if you're owning and operating that infrastructure, you want to make sure you've got some supply of spare parts on your side. It'd be the same as, a manufacturing plant. They have their, spare parts department. So I think that is a very important piece. And then, like I said, it takes a while to get a charger. So I want to echo Rob's point that, plan early, engage all the project stakeholders as early as possible. And, make sure you pull in that utility. So with this project, we had the opportunity of working with SCE, and they're knowledgeable. They have programs around electric vehicles, and, they're prepared and they've got experts, but you kind of also want to prepare for that education piece with different people involved in the project. I'll keep saying it, I'll say it again. It's a new industry. So there's a learning curve with that. I think all of us on the call are experts, but I think that we still, even myself, definitely have a lot to learn. And so being prepared for that piece and having kind of the patience of it is absolutely important with these projects to go successfully.
Thanks, Ruth. Boy, wealth of advice. I'm so happy to hear that you're really underscoring this point that this is a nascent technology market, and we're all kind of doing this together, and a lot of us are coming together probably for the first time on for such a large project. So that adds to the complexities in terms of planning and logistics. Excellent. Well, moving over to Kim now. We've been talking about private charging sites. Rob is pretty much overseeing Tech Fontana, DHE, Chino, and the other tech site. But Kim is really spearheading the effort for the first public charging station. So what is so different about that, Kim? What are you having to consider for a public charging station?
Yeah, really good question. So some of the things that have to be considered have to do with, so when you're on a private site, you know what vehicles are going to be there. You know that a forklift is usually in this area. You know that the heavy duty and medium duty trucks are usually in this area. When you're looking at a public station, or when you're thinking about a public station, there are a number of different types of vehicles that could come to your station. So when you're planning out that station or designing for that station, you have to keep all that in mind. Do you have enough passing lanes? Are your passing lanes large enough so that no one gets in the way, there isn't long lines that are formed? One thing that I should mention is that this station where we're putting the Volvo Lights chargers is an existing CNG station. So this will be the second fuel at that station. Understanding the traffic flow that happens there. What types of trucks come to the CNG station? Can we expect those same types of trucks at the EV portion of the station? So keeping traffic flow in mind, turning radiuses. The turning radius of a light duty vehicle is very different from a Class 8 trailer tractor. So ensuring that you have adequate space for the efficient and effective movement of all of these types of vehicles, and also pricing and marketing. What's the best price point for the vehicles that will be coming to the station? Some of the things that we don't know yet is how empty is the truck going to be when it gets there. So you set up a price according to that's reasonable for the fleet. So you really work with the fleet to get an understanding of what are your expectations and how can our station meet your expectations. And like I said before, so it is a CNG station, so adding these EV chargers is actually going to increase traffic at this station. What is that going to look like? How is that going to affect our existing customers? How many new customers can we expect? And then also thinking about, and this is something that we would have to think about for all, whether it be public or private, is the future. So when you're sizing your utility, do you just size for the charger that you're putting in now, or do you keep in mind that ABB is constantly advancing their technologies, and you want to be able to switch out that charger whenever a bigger, better, faster charger comes in? So keeping all those things in mind. But what I will say is there are quite a few similarities that Ruth and Rob mentioned. So utilities, being engaged with the utility early and often is very important. So we started engaging with the utility actually about a year ago at this station. And then, so we're doing the designing and permitting, or the designing and building of our station ourselves. And if we know anything about California, we know that permitting is a lengthy process at times. So keeping that in mind with the timelines that we have with the funding. So although there are differences, there are quite a few similarities.
Thanks, Kim. And I think everybody recognizes that just like in the light duty space where public charging infrastructure was critical to for the technology penetration, this is going to be the exact same deal when it comes to medium duty and heavy duty. So what Kim's doing and with Trillium, I think that's so important. And oh my God, so much to factor in when you're, sort of putting up a public charging station. It's not trivial. So I hope everybody recognizes that. So, obviously, Ruth, you're sort of supplying the hardware, the state-of-the-art charging hardware. So maybe we can sort of have a little three-way discussion, maybe you and Rob, maybe about sort of the coordination points, and maybe the same thing with you and Kim about what are you coordinating? How are you kind of working this and making sure that the Trillium site is up and running? So maybe Rob and Ruth, what are you guys doing to sort of make sure that your timelines are aligned and the infrastructure projects are going according to plan?
Yeah, so I guess I can start and then let Rob speak as well. But we're having weekly meetings on deliveries and discussing, if something gets pushed out, if it improves, just that constant communication, because things can change so quickly in a project. And especially when it comes down to, hey, everything is installed, ABB, it's time to commission this. We want to make sure we have a trained technician there to support that. And, there aren't that many trained technicians either at this point. Obviously we're continuing to train people and reach out all over the country. But once again, new technology, new industry, there's that buildup in every space of making sure we've got someone trained there, and, making sure that that doesn't push out the timeline for the project either, right? Because I'm sure I speak for everyone on the call when I say, once we've got it installed, we want to get it up and running as soon as possible and use those chargers. So we're having those weekly meetings to make sure that, everything gets installed properly. We can, however ABB can support Greenlots on that effort, although it doesn't seem that we need to. They're pretty trained on the technology as well. And then making sure we've got the resources we need to get the job done as soon as possible. And then one other piece I want to point out too is a lot of the historic work that ABB and Greenlots have done to coordinate this has allowed for a lot less on mine and Rob's plate around, the back end work, making sure, as Rob mentioned, Greenlots has this great software, but making sure that the ABB chargers can talk to that software and provide all of the data that, you guys need to understand what's going on with the chargers and what's going on with the trucks and that charger utilization data. All of that work has been done by all of my colleagues much smarter than I to make sure that our chargers point to the Greenlots software and provide the correct information. But, having that seamless connection is done through ABB's integration with Greenlots' Sky platform. But I think that's an absolutely important one to point out because, if we're trying to understand how our trucks or your trucks interact with the chargers, you want all of that data. And so, that's an important piece as well. But I guess, Rob, what else do you have to add on the coordination?
I appreciate that, Ruth. You've done a very good job covering. So, I mean, she's hit it on the head that this is what we go through every week with our weekly meetings. It's not all just about ABB and Greenlots. It's about all of our projects with Volvo. So we have great meetings every week, best of the week. So, and just to let everyone know, Volvo chose ABB to be a part of this program. ABB has undoubtedly the best equipment that we deal with in our industry. We really make it sound like everything rolls smoothly. We have our weekly meetings and we talk about, keeping on track of deliveries, and that's the goal of that meeting. But we really are, these units commission very well. We don't have any surprises. We don't have any major upsets. It's just been a pleasure to work with ABB on this. And again, I think Ruth kind of pinpointed everything to a T. So I'll take it back to you, Arvin.
Well, yeah, the one thing you guys are being modest and not sharing with this group is there's a lot of sidebar conversations and side meetings going on, which need to happen sometimes multiple times a day. So there's a lot of coordination, which, bringing back Kim into the discussion. Kim, so how are you and Ruth sort of working this out? I know it's a slightly different proposition, but as you mentioned, there are some similarities and you're still using the ABB hardware. Can you maybe walk us through some of the things that you and Ruth are looking at together, Kim?
Yeah, for sure. So we have the privilege of learning from everything that ABB and Greenlots and Volvo is going through now with the stations that are being implemented now. So a lot of the things that Ruth has mentioned, we're going to take advantage of. So the seamless connection between ABB and Greenlots, we're also using Greenlots at our public station. We're going to be able to take advantage of that. I know the certification and testing that has been done at other stations. A lot of the legwork has been picked up on that, so we're going to be taking advantage of it as well. Going back to what you were saying, Arvin, about it's a different value proposition. So when we look at the business case for this public station, right now there are 23 Volvo trucks, or there will be 23 Volvo trucks on the road. Hopefully all of those trucks come to our station. And quite honestly, our hope, and I'm sure it's the same as Volvo's, is for that number to grow significantly. But at this point, the majority of electric vehicles that are on the road are light duty vehicles. So we have made sure that our station has the capability of serving both the Volvo truck as well as light duty electric vehicles. So another thing that we've been coordinating with ABB on is how do we what type of infrastructure is required for the Volvo truck, and then what's required for the light duty truck, and making sure that we have enough power on site to ensure that we can serve both customers. So that starts to make the station a little complicated. How do we make sure that the light duty car can get in and it's not in the way of the Volvo truck? So those are going to be the fun and interesting pieces that we go through as we think about design and installation. But I will say that Trillium is very privileged in that a lot of the learnings that ABB and Greenlots is having now we'll be able to take advantage of.
Thanks, Kim, and you're very generous with your praise. And again, I think the big takeaway for me at least is you can't just sit in your room and just plan these things, or you can't just make decisions on an island. You really got to stay engaged, and then this is a continuum. So as you finish one site, you're going to pick up some important, valuable lessons, and you're going to hopefully do better as we go forward. So I think things are gradually going to improve for the better as the knowledge base is created and built upon. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm also looking at the chat window. There's a few questions, but I had a couple questions more from my panel. Kimberly, just to make sure we're on the same page, how much more time do we have? You want us to close at the top of the hour, or?
We have about 5 minutes more.
Okay, and then what about the questions in the chat window? Do we want to take them now, or?
I can, if you want to take them now, or we can take them at 9 o'clock, whatever you prefer.
I prefer 9 o'clock because I just, maybe some of those questions might be answered with this question. So, so this is a quick fire round. So we'll kind of go around, and there's 2 sets of questions. So the first question really is for all of you, and you can take turns in answering, but we're expecting a succinct response here. So what is your biggest regulatory or policy hurdle that you've faced getting up to this point? So maybe we start with Rob.
Policy hurdles, yeah. So again, like I've talked earlier, one of the biggest policy hurdles is basically permitting, working with cities. You know, electric vehicle charging scares people when they actually start talking about this large fleet charging facilities that we're installing. It just brings up a red flag in their mind, and they think they have to really do their due diligence, which they do, to verify what you're installing and that they understand what this is that you're installing, because it's so new. So that is probably, to me, the biggest hurdle that we deal with, of just kind of educating people along the way, especially the AHJ.
Cool, thanks. Ruth, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would say that for this project, you know, we faced a few hurdles because we had the challenge or opportunity of taking that CCS2 cable, which is commercially available in Europe, bringing it to the United States, but doing it in a way that was safe and followed code. So we got to work with a nationally recognized testing laboratory to make sure that everything was done to code, so that when we installed and are using that CCS2 cable, it's done safely and it's done in a way that we don't have to worry about, you know, okay, it was originally not a UL product and now it's going to be the cable itself, the chargers are all UL listed. And so having that testing lab come back out and recertify and verify, yes, everything's done to code, was kind of the hurdle, challenge, and fun piece, I think, of this project.
Thanks, Ruth. Kim?
Yeah, so our biggest regulatory challenge thus far really has to be around something called Rule 18 that's within Southern California Edison's territory. And really what it says is that we cannot resell electricity to heavy duty or medium duty trucks as a fuel. You can do it for light duty, or the rule says you can only do it for light duty. So we're actively going through the changing of this rule with a steering committee that includes quite a few big names, including Volvo and Greenlots and Tesla and Daimler and ChargePoint and Amply, in order to change this rule. So thus far, that's the biggest regulatory challenge. And quite honestly, Arvin, we haven't made it through yet.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Yep. Thank you all for that. So I guess as you can all sort of understand and appreciate, the technology piece is obviously evolving, but the policy and the regulatory pieces also need to fall in place. And I think this is just a great way for everybody to work together and learn and remove these policy hurdles. So we got 2 minutes. So my last question again to this expert panel, we'll start with Ruth and then Kim and Rob in that order. But what is your one major takeaway from this project so far? Or what would you like to tell the audience?
Yeah, I think I really want to reiterate that, it's new technology, new industry. So there's going to have to be some patience around, like I said, the supply chain piece. And then also just the education piece, working with, making sure that the AHJ is fully informed on what you're wanting to do. And everyone involved is understanding of the technology and your application, your use case. So that's my biggest piece, is that it's new. Things aren't readily available. You're not going to be able to start and finish a project in a month, as Rob mentioned as well. So having that patience and understanding of that is very important.
Thanks, Ruth. Kim?
Yeah, the big takeaway for me, or the key takeaway, is a Volvo Lights project has to be done in order to get an industry like this off the ground. So it's difficult for a fleet. A fleet can't treat an electric fleet as a diesel fleet. You need a group of partners in order to make it from one point to another point. You need to be connected to the OEM. You need to be connected to the network provider. You need to be connected to the infrastructure provider. You have to get an idea of how the public fueling would work, because there's not a public network yet. So having a group of experts like this is needed to get an industry off the ground.
Thanks, Kim. And Rob, take it away, top of the hour.
So my biggest takeaway here is just being involved in this new venture with Volvo, these new trucks. So, in my mind, starting these projects was the hardest thing is learning everything about these trucks, where the ports are, what the cord reach is from a charger to that port. We went through so much to figure out, with engineering, with customers, with our contractors, on site with tape measures. We didn't have cords. we had a tape measure. We're trying to figure out what is going to work best for a customer here. And honestly, we've had great support from our customers that are very into their projects, giving us, throwing in their 2 cents worth, what they think things should look like. And we've played around with ideas, and that's been the biggest takeaway. I've learned so much about, working with these big trucks that is so different than cars.
Thank you so much, everybody, for taking time out and sharing your learnings and and sharing so much information with this group. So Rob, Ruth, and Kim, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this panel and enriching this discussion. Kimberly, I give you back control.
Thank you, Arvin, and thank you all. It was very interesting. I'd like to turn it over to a bit of time. We have about 20 minutes now for question and answer before we break down into our work groups. And we have a question from James Schenkel. And who maintains the charging station after it's installed? And who pays for the electricity? So maybe, I don't know, Rob?
That's probably a Rob, Ruth question. And I don't know, this is, is it for the privately owned site or a public station? Because if it's a public station, it's a very different proposition, and maybe Kimberly can shed some light on that. But maybe Rob and Ruth, you want to take that?
Yeah, so as far as maintaining the stations, Greenlots offers an O&M package to maintain the chargers for any length of time. So we have some, agreements that we can come up with that everyone's comfortable with. We offer a 24-hour on-site, service for charging stations that have failed or disconnected. Generally, disconnected means lost communication. A lot of times those are just done remotely. So just to kind of put you at ease that, we can definitely take care of many issues that you don't have to worry about.
Ruth, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would say similar. So these chargers have dual uplink, meaning that all of that diagnostic data is sent to Greenlots, and then it's also sent to ABB, so that, we both have the ability to review that, kind of understand what's happening with the charger, if there's some type of issue occurring, try to troubleshoot remotely, and then obviously, send someone out or a technician out. But like I said earlier, I think one of the things to keep in mind, though, is locally owned spare parts is definitely an added bonus to making sure that your charger's up and running as quick as possible versus, sending a tech out. If you've got someone trained on site as well, I think that's, in my opinion, the best way. That is definitely my opinion on how I would want to support my chargers. And then obviously using partners like Greenlots or ABB to have that as well, since they're definitely a lot more knowledgeable on the hardware. Is kind of how you maintain it after it's installed.
Thank you, Ruth. In fact, Kimberly, if you would allow us, I would like Kim to also answer this, because I know there's some transit agencies and potentially some fleets here. So, Kim, how would you answer this question? From where you're sitting?
Yeah, from where I'm sitting. Yeah. So the chargers that are at our station will be maintained and operated by Trillium, and we would handle the payment of the electricity. So that, similar to any diesel station or public gasoline station that you go to, those types of chargers are passed through in the, I guess it depends on how you do your pricing policy, but it can be passed through in the pricing that the fleet is charged. So yeah, the maintenance and the operation is done by Trillium, and the electricity bill is paid for by Trillium.
Great.
Thanks, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go to the next question, Kimberly, or?
Sure, we can go to the next question. So one of our faculty members, Nasreen Havidi, asks, what factors do you consider when deciding about the location of the chargers, and what kind of analysis do you use for such decision making?
I think that's a Rob question.
Yeah.
Rob and Kim, maybe you guys can take that. Again, Rob provides the private side of things, and Kim the public charging, and Ruth, jump in if you have to add a comment or so, please.
Sure. Yeah, so I think I want to go back to what Kim pointed out earlier was, turning radiuses of these trucks and how, easily accessible it is for a truck to pull into a station that doesn't interrupt your daily activity in a parking lot or your place of business. That's the first discussion we have with the site host, on site, trying to determine that everyone's okay with this location. Now, most of the time, this location is decided by the fact of how close it is to a utility. So is it your existing service? Likely it's not, because these are large services. These are 1,000 amp to 2,000 amp services. So you just don't tie this into your existing facility. So we're looking for a location to install a new service, new transformer, PME switches, load centers to supply the power to these stations. So that's the biggest key factor.
Kim?
Yeah, and then, yep. So I'll answer the question two different ways. So choosing the location, first I'll start kind of bigger picture. So choosing the location for the public station itself. When you think about the Inland Empire and one of the fleet customers is, or most of these customers are located in Chino, they're headed down to the Port of Long Beach and Port of LA. It really came down to finding a location that was kind of centrally located. So if you look at the distance between Chino and the ports, it's about 50 miles, and kind of dead smack in the center is our station. So it ended up being a pretty good location, or that's what we think for now. We'll see how things work out when things actually get implemented. The second way that I'll answer this question is going back to what Rob was saying, which is you think about turning radiuses. When you think about light duty charging, typically that is a parking lot style charging. So you go and you park into a parking lot or a parking spot, and then when you're done, you back up and you leave. Well, as you can imagine, for medium and heavy duty trucks, it's not that easy to park and then back up and turn around and get out of that parking spot. So we kept that in mind. So the way that we will be doing our charging at our station is very similar to a gasoline station or a diesel station, where it's a pull-through type of configuration. And that was very intentional because of the difficulty that comes along with parking a medium and heavy-duty truck. So I answered it in two different ways, but I think both relevant.
I like it. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I don't know, Ruth, if you have anything to add to that, or we can move on to the next question, I guess.
Yeah,
I think that was well said by both.
Our next question, and I think it was partially answered, and Rob kind of addressed this, but it's from another one of our faculty members, Yun-Fei Ho. Are there any safety concerns for high-powered chargers, and how is liability in looking at a public charging station dealt with?
So it's very similar to any public fueling station. What I will say is, let me go back. So when you're thinking about a gasoline station or a diesel station, there are liabilities that land on the station owner. So if, for instance, we didn't install the charger correctly, we didn't put in a circuit breaker, we didn't get the transformer installed correctly from the utility, and something happens, that's on us, right? But if it's misused by the user, then that's something that would land, some of the liability would land on the user. So it's very similar to your typical gasoline or diesel or even a CNG station. What I will say for this is this industry is newer. So there are going to be some learnings. We are taking some of the safety precautions that are put in place on the light duty side, and that's why it's very helpful to work with a counterparty like ABB, because they are so big in the light duty side. They know all of the safety implications and the design measures that need to be put in the infrastructure in order to make the station safe. And then we've also done design and engineering and installation of light duty stations. So it's really taking that knowledge and implementing it into a higher powered situation. So short answer, very similar to if you pull up at a gas station. If you start doing crazy things, it ends up on you. But if it comes down to the design and the installation, that liability is on us.
I don't know if any of you want to add to that.
I was just going to say those are great points, and yeah, it's interesting because it's newer and it's, people are learning how to use these stations, right? But the other piece I want to address is the safety concern for those high power chargers. People that have a better understanding of electricity understand that, this could be scary, right? We're talking about 350 kilowatts here. And so that's the piece that, fair question about the safety concerns, but with the way that the chargers are built and some of the safety that you put upstream, if there was some sort of power surge, there really isn't a concern around the chargers. And I think that the best way to kind of show that that's true is that we've got those 350 kilowatt charging systems in the US. We've got them all over California, and people have used them, and we haven't seen any issues. And, there isn't that level of concern because of the way that it's designed, and there's kind of safety components built into the inside and the brains of the charger, as well as then, the vehicles are smart too, and they know that if there's some sort of error occurring, they're going to stop receiving that power as well, which will tell the charger, hey, shut down. So we've got that, emergency stop buttons and things like that. So it really isn't an issue, although it's a completely fair question.
Okay, all right. There's a question, how about inductive charging? From Ellen Wagner.
Inductive charging is going to be a little tough when it comes to delivering 350 kW to a truck, even 150 kW, because there's power loss between inductive charging pads and the vehicle itself. So you have power loss through that kind of air, distance. So I think we're a ways off from that. I think that really we're looking at direct connections for many years in the future here.
I agree with that. And the other thing that I'll point out is this is also an operational question, right? So we have to kind of look at the customer and see if their warehouse or cross dock or wherever they want to install the chargers, assuming where the trucks are either parked or domiciled or idling or wherever, that can actually accommodate these inductive charging hardware. So people are talking about it as another solution, and maybe it is, and I think it is, but again, I guess it's not its time yet. There's a lot of practical considerations that need to be taken into account, not just the technology, but the other side of things.
Can I clarify the question?
Sure. Absolutely, please.
Okay. What I'm talking about, and it's in operation in a couple different countries, is continual inductive cables and dedicated lanes, and it's operation now for semi trucks as well as for buses.
You're talking about the cantilever, the overhead catenary kind of
I'm
thing?
talking about inductive and the ground.
Inductive,
stuff,
okay.
Over the pavement.
Okay. Yeah, my answer to that would, again, I'd love to learn a little bit more about those projects, but I can tell you that wherever it takes massive infrastructure, especially having separate lanes and things of that sort, there's got to be a push coming from the public sector, and it requires a lot of investments in terms of financial resources and also real estate resources to accommodate these kinds of things. So I think there could be solutions. Again, I mean, when you look at automated driving, people have proposed solutions for having an automated vehicle lane and things of that sort. I think there are definitely options, but we'll have to kind of see where it can be deployed and what are sort of the means to get that realized.
Mm-hmm. So just a really practical short question before we go on to the next one from Greg is, so how long does it take to charge up one of these vehicles? So if you're in the if you're in the charging station, you know, and how long is the truck there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think, again, what you're going to see is you're probably not going to use the truck chargers the way you do car chargers. So that's where understanding the operation is extremely critical. So we're looking at customers that pretty much have, you know, back to base kind of operations. So we're installing chargers where the trucks are domiciled. So therefore, after their operation, they can go back and they can plug back the trucks and it can charge. Now there's two options. There's DC fast charging and there's high power AC slow charging. When you go to Kim's station or Kim's stop, basically you're looking to top off. You're probably not looking to sit there and charge for extended periods of time. So I think I'm not giving you a direct answer because it's hard. It really depends on the state of the battery and then also the extent to which you want to charge or top off, if you will. So I think a lot of those operational parameters are things that we're trying to understand as a part of this activity, and then provide this information back to the end user community as to, again, what's the best way to use the grid.
Right. And so in thinking about the range, is there any thoughts that the actual supply chain and the movement of goods would change along with the capacity of the trucks or the distance of the trucks? Is there?
Absolutely. And I think it was Ruth or Kim or Rob or maybe all three, they kind of said, you know, in a very subtle way that when it comes to the customer, replacing diesel trucks with electric trucks is not a 1:1 ratio. Because the customers are figuring out that they love this technology. It is so good, and I think it's so good for the environment. And it's got a lot of benefits, right? It's very quiet. That's the other thing. But it's not how you would use their newest truck. So the customer who purchases a new truck wants to put the maximum number of miles on the newest truck. And so they run it in more than one different application, more than one route. Some of those things are possible with the electric truck, but I think as we're working with the customer, they're understanding what is the best way to deploy electric trucks into their operation. And we're understanding more about their operation. And as this charging network actually scales, we're figuring out how we can advance the technology on the truck. And by that, I mean pretty much adding battery packs, extending the range, and doing things of that sort. So absolutely, I think just the routes and some of the operational changes will be seen in order to accommodate these electromobility solutions.
Okay. And that kind of leads us into our next question from Greg Holzheiser. Are there similar initiatives underway in other areas of the country?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one also. So Volvo Lights, again, is very unique because it brought together about 16 different partners, unique collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. But it goes back to 2018, where ARB, the Air Resources Board, had a proposal under their zero and near zero emissions freight facilities program. I know that's an earful, but it's a publicly funded project. As I mentioned, $90 million. 50% of that comes from ARB. So again, to us, it tells that incentives are absolutely critical when you're thinking about advanced technologies, not just the vehicle side, but also the infrastructure side. We didn't get into this, but the cost for deploying these charging equipment and getting the sites completed, it's not an insignificant amount of money. So again, the incentives are at play, as you can imagine. And so to answer your question in a very succinct manner, there's probably one or maybe a couple more initiatives. So the ZANZEF program, it actually funded, I think 3 or 4 projects. I know AQMD has funded another project with Penske and Freightliner. So I would say not more than maybe a handful of projects, but incentives are at play. So that's, again, something I want everybody to understand.
And then I know we're kind of for time with the Q&A, but I just wanted to ask one, if you could all think about, and you might not be comfortable with this question, but if you could break out your crystal ball, right? What do you really see the future of what's going to happen, right? How is this going to build out? What do you see the future being for heavy duty electric vehicles?
I'll let my panelists take first stab at this question. I'm sure.
Hard one.
Yeah.
I've been talking for this while, so yeah, I want to.
So I'll say what Trillium and Love sees, and I think it may take a little pivot, but not too much. When we look over the future, and I'll adjust the question a little bit. What do I see with zero emissions? I think it's going to be a mixture of two different types of fuels. I think it's going to be a little bit of hydrogen and a little bit of electric. I think they both work in different applications. So understanding, just like Arvin was saying, return to base operations, that's perfect for electric. Now, if you're talking over the road, long distances, we're really looking at OEMs like Volvo to see how can we make that work in the electric space. But a fuel that is ready for that now is hydrogen. So the short answer is I think it's going to be a mixture of two different or the two zero emission fuels.
Okay, great, thank you. Ruth, do you have any?
Yeah, so that's a question I could probably talk for hours on. I'll try to keep it concise as well. It's a good one, and it's also a tough one to answer. But I think that definitely understanding the different use cases, and then, you know, if I'm doing overnight charging or things like that, where my trucks are going home and they're either sitting for a few hours while they get actually filled up, you know, how do we figure out how we can charge that? And then how do we scale that, right? Because right now, I mean, we spoke about the first Volvo Light site, and it has 5 charging ports. It's got 2 from the 50 kilowatt and then 3 from that 150 kilowatt. And so how do we scale that when we're hopefully for the shorter distances doing fully electric and only electric? You know, as Kim said, I think there's a different discussion to be had for those longer trips, but for the last mile electric, but how do we make sure that, you know, it's also not a huge demand for the grid, because the utility piece is going to be really important. So I also think that we'll start to see really creative solutions, you know, in the future as to potentially, you know, how do I make sure I can charge all my vehicles, but maybe I'm not pulling from the grid, is kind of one of the other thoughts that I think, like I said, battery energy storage, the creative solution is what we're going to start to see after we take these pilots. You know, figuring out where we can get our energy and then making sure that's clean energy, right? Because that's the important piece. If we're charging these, we want that energy to be clean, you know, so that it's a full end-to-end clean solution.
Absolutely. Rob, you have a crystal ball over there? Any visions?
I do not, but I do want to follow up on a point that Ruth was making there about clean energy and solar. We've not touched the fact that we are working with solar companies and solar as part of our projects. We've never touched that point at all during these conversations. So not that I am part of the solar installation, but we work with the customer and our partners that are solar contractors. So we all work together as part of a group to install solar and battery storage if possible. So it definitely is something to look into if you're interested.
All right, that's great. Thank you all again. It was really interesting, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I'd like to invite you all to still stay with us as we're going to break down into some meeting rooms where we can talk about what we heard, what we didn't hear, and then we'll come back in about 20 minutes where we can then report out and finish up the conversation and really think about how do we move this forward? How do we move it forward? So if you'll just stay with us just for a moment, Kathleen will be putting us all into meeting rooms, and then we'll see you all back here in about 20 minutes.
Yep, everybody's back now.
All right, well, thank you all for hanging in with us, and I'd like to invite our friend Josh Landis to start with from the findings of his group.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I have my notes over here, so if I'm looking this way, we had a really good discussion. You know, the first question was something you learned today, and this actually came up towards the end, but the first responder training for this new technology was something that I learned that I hadn't really thought about. Is you have a electric truck and what happens if there is an issue, how do or first responders is key. And so the other part was, kind of some of the regulatory hurdles. The Rule 18 came to mind and kind of redesigning, and then Arvin was able to explain some of the background on that is when it was created in 2010 and just, the challenges of reinventing the kind of the new rules and how we kind of respond to being able to allow for the field. One thing that came to mind that we talked about too is this idea of adapt and overcome. So as one site is built, you kind of have some lessons learned and what can you do to improve it for the next time. So that was really important. And then some of the ideas, and I think a lot of it starts what we're doing here with expanding this idea into the colleges and trades programs to kind of workforce development, charging stations, certifications. The other part was really this idea of community involvement and the impact of building a charging, infrastructure in a community, getting the, kind of community buy-in, understanding that it's not going to necessarily have this adverse effect that might be perceived. So really the community outreach element of a new charging station and how it's not going to always cause more problems. There's not going to be an increase in traffic. So mitigating that with just, accurate information.
All right, thanks so much, Josh. Yufei, would you like to share out from your group?
Oh, of course. Well, Rob was in our group, so the majority of the time we'll keep testing him on the questions on how to build a charging station and ask for his insight. Well, one of the things that we all learned today and we're impressed is that how the Volvo Light project is being established, and especially considering this really short time frame. The project started last April, and Rob told us that the actual construction of the building wouldn't start until November. So it's really impressive how to put all these many partners and such a large project together in such a short period of time. And we also appreciate the insight from Ruth on the hardware equipment from AED, and also glad to hear about the public truck charging stations the project Kim is working on. So when it comes to some ideas that came to our mind but we didn't hear, one thing that we're curious about is how is this COVID-19 shutdown are affecting the projects or the overall process on how people are experiencing with this. One thing that I probably can think about is, well, as a kind of maybe advantage during this COVID-19 shutdown, is that it seems that we can make a good case for switching to electric vehicles. So we've seen reports that because people are working from home, because there are less traffic on the road, there's really a significant decrease in terms of air pollution. So it shows that really there's a need for vehicle electrification. And another thing that came to our mind but we didn't hear is we're curious about what will be the cost compared to operating the electric trucks versus operating the traditional trucks. And I guess this probably is something that this pilot project of Volvo Light is trying to figure out as well. So this is something we're curious. For the questions on top 3 ideas for how can we move today's dialogue forward, Kevin mentioned one is that it seems that there's a lot of challenge in terms of the regulatory process. So one of the ideas that probably can help with moving forward will be advocate on how can we streamline the regulatory process on all these projects. So that's one. Another idea that we would like to hear is, we're kind of curious about, is that we want to learn more about the performance of this electric truck fleets and how they perform over time. I guess it's probably coming back to the objective of the project after all. We're curious about are they cost effective? Can they really replace this traditional service? And along this line of thinking, maybe at a later time we can talk about how can we build a business case for projects similar to this Volvo Light. It seems that this project historically supported by this incentive program from the government. But if this is successful, or if we can learn more about this, maybe we can start to build a big business case to really promote this truck electrification. So that's pretty much what we have in our group.
All right, thank you. Danny, would you like to share out from your group the top 3 ideas?
Okay. So a couple of things on the first one. So it's really interesting to look at the timeline and the permitting and the order and the map of the utilities and everything. So having a better understanding of it really solidifies some of the things that were known before and so on. And the current status of the region and the advancement of the IE really had one of the participants had something really did not know of what was going on in the region. Some of the things that were not discussed that they would like to hear is how financial markets and IPOs for electric trucks and infrastructure and how that develops and how that impacts us would be a major thing. Another thing is that this is a very broad topic and many things could be discussed on the topic itself. So there's so many things that could be covered and we could spend hours discussing it. One more last thing on that is the V2G, vehicle to grid. There's a potential for that for trucks. We don't know if that has any sort of impact on us. I know it has something on the consumer side of things rather than trucks. And lastly, a couple of things that we would like to move forward with is that there's issues that are going to happen. There's going to be hiccups with the adoption of commercial vehicles, commercial trucks in the industry. And so how do we approach these problems? We have to be aware of them, know these problems ahead of time and see how we could tackle them. We need to probably take a closer look at the user experience as well and have proper training programs on how to use the technology and the facilities. And another interesting point was the configuration of these facilities, right? The mixed fleet, the turning radius, the different challenges that come with those. And that's pretty much it.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Paulina.
Yeah, hello everyone. So in my group, there was, in terms of moving the dialogue forward, there was plenty of talk about education, getting people in the same room, doing more forums, just bringing awareness of the electric trucks and this new technology. Also thinking about fueling solutions for long distance and short distance vehicles. Also something that I thought was interesting was a concern of the high power trucks on roads and the maintenance of infrastructure. So taking care of highways, like potholes and funding that can support these electric vehicles. So I thought that was something that was pretty interesting in my group.
All right, great, thank you. Our group had many, we were lucky to have Kim in our group, and so we had a large focus on sort of picking her brain. But some of the top items that we really thought about or talked about was, the importance of public leadership, of government really stepping in, providing the incentives, and really helping to get through the system itself. So rethinking, we have some unintended consequences of how rules are written, and now rethinking how our society is moving forward. And how do we deal with those unintended consequences of having, these different regulations and rules that are out there, which no one was really thinking about the future when they were writing them in some ways, you could say. Also, the importance of really sharing the business model or building out that business model and figuring out how we can work better across our silos, right? Making sure that there is more collaboration with the business and the private sector to build the richness of what these projects mean. And then finally, the PR portion of it and getting people comfortable with new technologies is going to be a challenge that we're all going to have to deal with. And maybe it does come about through forums such as this in really educating individuals on the pros and possibly the cons, so that they're well-informed consumers and users of the new technologies as they come about. So those were the main findings from our group. Again, I would like to thank you all for being here. It was a really great dialogue this time. As you know, we will be putting together the speaker highlights as well as proceedings from this dialogue if you'd like to visit that at a later time. And also we invite you to join us at our next dialogue, which will be in August, in talking about smart transportation or smart cities 2.0. And how do we move forward and build out the infrastructure that needs to come into the cities and work with governance to think about, again, moving us towards the future of new technologies and new ideas and possibly 21st century institutions that can deal with all of these different issues that we have. Again, thank you, and I wish you all a very good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.